No one in this kingdom can make that shot. Captain Derek Vaughn's voice cut through the wind at the Blackwood Mountain firing tower. 13 royal warriors stood behind him, and 13 untouched score markers hung beside their names. For 1,000 meters across the frozen valley, a ceremonial steel target waited on the opposite ridge, barely visible even through the enchanted range optic. Snow swept sideways between the mountains. Crimson wind flags snapped violently along the firing line. Derek pulled off one leather glove and threw it onto the table. The upper current is impossible. No one argued. These were the Alpha King's finest marksmen. Men who had fought border wars, hunted rogue wolves through winter forests, and earned medals beneath Blackwood banners. Every one of them had missed. A servant moved quietly behind the warriors, collecting empty cups from the observation tables. White medieval dress. Silver embroidery. Long chestnut brown hair. Slender hands wrapped around a serving tray. Most of the men had stopped noticing her hours ago. Then a soft female voice came from behind them. "My turn." Silence. Derek slowly turned. Emily Carter stood with the tray balanced against one hip. Her luminous blue eyes were not on him. They were fixed on the distant ridge. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. If you believe that kindness is power, hit like and subscribe. These stories remind us love redeems the broken." Now, back to Emily. Someone laughed. Another warrior looked over his shoulder as though expecting to find the real speaker behind her. Derek stared at Emily for 3 full seconds. "Excuse me." Emily swallowed. She could still take it back. She had spent 2 years inside Blackwood Hunting Lodge learning exactly how useful silence could be. Silence kept noblemen from asking questions about Daniel Carter. Silence kept academy officers from remembering the Omega candidate whose qualification papers they had buried. Silence allowed her to carry wine through rooms where powerful men discussed things they would never say in front of someone they considered important. A waitress heard everything because nobody believed a waitress mattered. But 13 shots had crossed that valley today. Emily had watched everyone. And everyone had made the same mistake. I said, her fingers tightened beneath the serving tray. "My turn." This time nobody laughed immediately. At the Royal Observation Platform, Alpha King Adrian Blackwood raised his head. Emily had avoided looking directly at him all morning. Everyone knew the stories. 29 years old. Ruthless in war. Impossible to deceive. A king whose authority had held the northern packs together through 3 winters of border conflict. He stood taller than the commanders surrounding him, black medieval armor fitted across broad shoulders, a dark royal cloak moving in the mountain wind. His angular face revealed almost nothing. Only his eyes betrayed that he had heard her. Violet. Faintly luminous beneath the gray winter sky. They settled on Emily. Not her tray. Not her apron. Her. Derek recovered first. "Perhaps the altitude has confused you." A few warriors smiled. Emily lowered the tray onto the nearest table. Porcelain touched wood with a quiet click. "No, Captain. You understand what this is?" Derek gestured toward the firing station. "A crown marksman trial." "Yes. And that target is 4,000 meters away." "I know. 13 trained warriors have attempted it." Emily looked at the score markers. "I counted." A suppressed laugh came from somewhere behind Derek. His expression tightened. "Then perhaps you also counted how many years they trained before being permitted to touch a royal long-range weapon." Emily said nothing. Her gaze moved beyond him toward the valley. Snow crossed the lower slope from west to east. Halfway across, the flags moved differently. Higher still, thin ice crystals traveled almost straight south. 3 currents. Derek had corrected for 2. So had the others. Emily had noticed the 3rd before the 5th warrior fired. She had almost spoken then. Almost. But old memories had stopped her. The academy desk. The officer who never looked at her qualification score. The sealed rejection letter. Temperament unsuitable for combat service. She had been 19 when she learned that sometimes a polite sentence could close a door just as effectively as a lock. "Emily." The voice came from the side. Commander Ethan Cole, gray-haired and scarred across one cheek, was watching her strangely. Unlike the others, Ethan knew her name. "What are you looking at?" Emily hesitated. Derek scoffed. "Apparently our waitress has discovered something 13 marksmen missed." Emily ignored him. She pointed toward the far ridge, the snow above the ravine. Ethan followed her finger. "What about it?" "It changes direction before the target." Ethan's amusement disappeared. He reached for the observation lens. Derek shook his head. "There is no meaningful cross-current at that elevation." "There is," Emily said. Derek turned sharply. "And you know that how?" She wished he had not asked. She could feel Adrian Blackwood watching from the platform. Emily looked toward the distant target again. "Because the ravens keep entering the valley from the western ridge, then climbing before they cross." Ethan found the birds through the lens. His face became still. "They're compensating." "Yes." Derek stepped closer. "You expect us to believe you calculated a 4,000-meter wind pattern by watching birds?" "No," Emily finally met his eyes. The birds only confirmed it. That earned complete silence. Adrian descended one step from the royal platform. "Confirmed what?" His voice was deep, controlled, and somehow quieter than Derek's. Yet every warrior immediately straightened. Emily's pulse quickened. She had never spoken directly to the Alpha King. "3 wind layers, Your Majesty." Adrian glanced toward the flags. "Our spotters recorded 2. The 3rd doesn't reach the firing tower." His violet gaze returned to her. "But it reaches the target." Emily nodded. Derek exhaled impatiently. "Your Majesty, with respect, allowing a servant onto the firing line turns a royal trial into entertainment." Adrian did not look at him. "I am not entertained." Derek fell silent. The Alpha King studied Emily for another moment. "Have you fired a long-range weapon before?" Every instinct she had developed during 2 quiet years told her to lie. To smile. To apologize. To pick up the tray and become invisible again. Then the wind shifted across the mountains, carrying snow toward the distant steel target. Emily remembered another winter. Her father's hand adjusting her shoulder. Daniel Carter's voice telling her never to fight the wind. "Listen to it." Emily lifted her chin. "Yes, Your Majesty." Something changed in Ethan's face. Adrian noticed. "At this distance?" he asked. Emily looked across 4,000 meters of frozen valley. "Farther." No one laughed now. Derek stared at her. Ethan whispered something under his breath that sounded suspiciously like Daniel's name. And Alpha King Adrian Blackwood stepped away from the firing station, leaving the weapon untouched. "Then the line is yours." Emily looked at the rifle, then at 13 royal warriors who had spent the morning seeing nothing more than a waitress carrying cups. Her hands were steady when she removed her serving gloves. Because the truth was, Emily Carter had never been afraid of the 4,000-meter shot. She had been afraid of what would happen after everyone discovered she could make it. By sunrise, Emily Carter had already served coffee to 12 men who would never have trusted her with the weapon hanging 20 feet from their table. She moved quietly through Blackwood Hunting Lodge, carrying a polished silver tray between long rows of stone pillars while royal warriors prepared for the crown marksman trial outside. Her white medieval dress brushed the dark floor, silver embroidery catching the firelight whenever she passed the enormous hearth. Over it, she wore the simple serving apron expected of lodge staff. The clothing made her easy to classify. Young. Omega. Servant. Harmless. Emily had learned long ago that people rarely looked beyond the category they chose first. Waitress. She stopped. Captain Derek Vaughn sat with 4 members of the Royal Marksman Corps. His black uniform carried enough silver insignia to announce his rank before he ever opened his mouth. He pushed an empty cup toward the edge of the table without looking at her. "More coffee." "Yes, Captain." Emily filled it. Derek continued speaking to the warriors as though she had already disappeared. "For 1,000 meters. Ceremonial steel target. 3 authorized attempts for the final rotation." One warrior leaned back. "Wind. West across the lower valley. Northwest near the ridge." Emily's hand paused for less than a second above the coffee pot. "Northwest?" She looked toward the tall windows. Snow moved almost horizontally outside. Along the nearest pine line, branches bent east. But above the distant ravine, a thin stream of powder lifted southward from the cliff face. Different current. Derek had missed it. Or his spotters had. You planning to pour that today? Derek asked. Emily looked down. His cup was full. It already is, Captain. One warrior covered a smile. Derek's eyes narrowed. Emily calmly returned the pot to her tray. Anything else? No, she turned away. Actually. Derek caught an empty cup from another table and held it out behind her. Take this. Emily stopped. Both hands were already occupied. She shifted the tray carefully and accepted the cup. Derek's men watched. It was a small thing. Almost nothing. That was why men like Derek enjoyed doing it. Cruelty was easier to defend when it looked like inconvenience. Thank you, Emily said. Derek seemed disappointed by the absence of humiliation on her face. She walked on. Near the western archway, Commander Ethan Cole was checking a leather case of observation lenses. He had silver in his hair and an old scar crossing his left cheek. Unlike most officers, he always called Emily by name. Morning, Emily. Commander. Ethan glanced at her crowded tray. Vaughn treating you like furniture again? Furniture gets left alone. Ethan almost smiled. Emily continued toward the kitchen. Before she reached it, a horn sounded outside. First assembly. Warriors began moving toward the firing tower. Emily stepped aside to let them pass. One after another, armored men crossed the hall carrying range books, gloves, and equipment. None noticed the young waitress, watching the snow beyond the windows. Except one. Alpha King Adrian Blackwood descended the central staircase with 2 royal advisors behind him. Conversation died around the hall. He wore detailed black armor beneath a dark royal cloak, his broad shoulders giving him the silhouette of something carved from the castle itself. Short black hair framed an angular face that seemed naturally severe. His violet eyes swept across the room. Emily lowered hers. Not from submission. From habit. She had spent 2 years avoiding royal attention. Adrian passed her. Then stopped. Emily's pulse shifted. Your tray. She looked up. One cup was trembling slightly against its saucer. She steadied it. Forgive me, Your Majesty. I wasn't criticizing you. His gaze moved toward the windows. You were watching the ridge. Emily said nothing. Adrian waited. That was somehow worse than interrogation. The weather is changing, she finally said. You can tell from here? Some of it. His violet eyes remained on her for another second. Then one advisor called his name. Adrian continued toward the doors without another question. Emily released a slow breath. Ethan had witnessed the exchange. Careful, he murmured as he passed. The king notices things. Emily looked toward Adrian's retreating figure. So do I. Ethan stopped. Something in her answer made him study her, but Emily had already turned toward the kitchen. An hour later, she carried refreshments onto the observation level of the firing tower. The valley opened beneath them like a frozen ocean. For 1,000 meters away, mounted against a pale mountainside, stood the oversized steel target used for the Crown's ceremonial long-range trial. Enchanted observation lenses allowed spotters to track impacts at distances ordinary sight could not resolve. Range markers had been established before dawn. The challenge was extreme, but not blind. Skills still mattered. So did patience. The first warrior settled into position. Emily placed cups behind the officers. Wind reading, he asked. Lower valley, west to east, a spotter answered. Upper ridge, northwest. Emily looked at the ravens circling below the ridge. One bird entered the open valley, climbed abruptly, then corrected south. She felt an old voice return from memory. Don't watch one flag, Em. The mountain is bigger than your firing line. Her father had said it while snow collected in his beard. Daniel Carter. Royal Scout. Marksman. The first person who had ever put a training weapon into her hands without asking whether an Omega belonged behind it. The first shot cracked across the valley. Seconds passed. The spotter leaned into the enchanted lens. Mississippi left. A murmur moved through the tower. The warrior frowned. Emily did not. She knew where the shot had gone before the spotter announced it. Second warrior. Another crack. Mississippi left. Third. Mississippi fourth. Fifth. Each warrior adjusted. Each calculation became more complicated. None accounted for what happened above the ravine. Emily continued serving drinks. That was the strangest part. 13 elite marksmen were trying to solve the mountain while the person carrying their coffee already knew what they were missing. By the 7th attempt, Adrian Blackwood was no longer watching only the firing line. From the royal platform, his gaze occasionally moved toward Emily. She pretended not to notice. By the 10th, Ethan was watching her too. "You haven't checked the target through the lens once," he said quietly. Emily set down a cup. "I don't need to." Ethan's brow furrowed. "Why?" Another shot thundered. Emily listened to the distant report dissolve between the mountains. Then the spotter called, "Mississippi left." She looked toward the snow rising above the ravine. "Because they're all missing the same way." Ethan followed her gaze. His expression slowly changed. Outside, Captain Derek Vaughn stepped toward the firing station for the 13th attempt. The best marksman in the rotation. The man everyone expected to succeed where the others had failed. Emily felt her fingers tighten around the tray. Derek lowered himself behind the weapon. The flag snapped. The ravens climbed. And Emily knew, before his finger ever touched the trigger, exactly where his shot was going to miss. The 13th shot cracked across the frozen valley. Emily did not look through the enchanted observation lens. She watched the ravens instead. 3 black shapes climbed above the ravine at exactly the point where the invisible upper current struck the mountain wall. Captain Derek Vaughn's shot crossed the lower wind correctly, entered the second current, then reached the final stretch where his calculations stopped accounting for the mountain. Seconds passed. The steel target remained silent. The spotter leaned closer to the lens. Mississippi, Derek did not move. Direction. The spotter hesitated. Left. Emily lowered her eyes to the serving tray before anyone could notice the recognition on her face. 13 warriors. 13 misses. Almost all drifting toward the same side. Derek rose slowly from the firing station. "Check the optic." A technician approached. "It was calibrated before dawn, Captain." "Check it again." "Yes, Captain." Derek removed his glove and stared across the valley as though the mountain had personally insulted him. "The upper marker is wrong." Ethan Cole stood near Emily. "Or incomplete." Derek turned. "What?" Ethan looked toward the ravine. "There may be another current above the cut." "There isn't." "Emily thinks there is." The words landed harder than Ethan probably intended. Every nearby warrior looked toward her. Emily's stomach tightened. Derek followed their attention until his eyes found the quiet waitress standing behind the observation table. "Emily?" His tone carried amusement now. "Our waitress has an opinion?" Ethan's jaw shifted. "I said she noticed something." "Of course she did." Derek walked toward Emily. Perhaps while pouring coffee she solved what 13 trained marksmen could not. A few warriors laughed. Emily kept both hands around the tray. She knew this moment. Different room. Different uniform. Same judgment. At 19, she had stood before 3 academy officers while one pushed her qualification papers aside without reading the final page. She remembered the words more clearly than the man's face. Omega candidates are better suited to support positions. Support. Serving. Carrying. Watching other people receive permission to become what she had trained to be. Derek stopped in front of her. "Well," Emily glanced toward Ethan. He looked almost apologetic. "Too late." "The current changes above the ravine," she said. The laughter faded. Derek folded his arms. "And what instrument did you use to determine that?" "None." "Interesting." "I watched the snow." Derek smiled. "Snow. And the birds." This time the laughter returned. Emily led it. Across the platform, Adrian Blackwood did not join them. The Alpha King stood beside the royal observation lens, his black armor catching pale winter light. His glowing violet eyes remained fixed on Emily. Derek gestured toward the valley. 13 crown marksmen used calibrated range markers, enchanted optics, and trained spotters. But apparently we should have asked the waitress to watch birds. Emily felt heat rise beneath her pale skin. She could retreat. Apologize. Pick up the empty cups. Become invisible again. Instead, she looked directly at Derek. The equipment tells you what happens where the equipment is measuring. His smile weakened. And? Emily pointed toward the ravine. There is no marker in the final rise before the target. Ethan immediately lifted the observation lens. She's right. Derek frowned. That proves nothing. No, Emily said. The misses do. Silence returned. Derek stepped closer. Explain. Emily placed the tray on the table. The first 4 shooters corrected for the lower valley wind. Their shots still moved left. The next 5 increased compensation, but not enough because they treated the upper ridge as one continuous current. She looked toward the target. It isn't. One warrior stopped smiling. Another glanced at his range book. Emily continued. The ravine forces air upward along the rock face. The snow rises there before moving south. The ravens climb before crossing because they feel the same current. Ethan lowered the lens slowly. A vertical deflection with a lateral push. Emily nodded. Brief, but enough. Derek stared at her. You memorized every miss? I was standing here, serving drinks. I can do 2 things at once. Someone coughed to hide a laugh. Derek's face hardened. Then Adrian spoke. Enough. 1 word. The entire platform settled. He descended from the royal observation level, dark cloak shifting behind him. Emily had seen powerful alphas before. Most announced dominance before entering a room. Adrian did the opposite. He simply entered the space, and everyone else seemed to become aware of how much noise they had been making. He stopped beside the firing station. Commander Cole. Your Majesty. Can her theory be tested? Ethan considered the valley. Yes. We can reposition 1 observation lens toward the ravine and release powder from the upper marker. Do it. Derek stared at him. Your Majesty, surely we are not delaying the crown trial because a servant. Adrian turned his head. Derek stopped speaking. We are delaying nothing, Adrian said. 13 shots failed. Someone offered an explanation. We test the explanation. No anger. No defense of Emily. Just logic. Somehow that meant more. Royal technicians adjusted the observation equipment. A signal flag rose from the distant marker. Powder was released above the ravine. Through the enchanted lens, Ethan watched the pale cloud descend, then suddenly lift and slide south. His expression changed. There it is. A murmur moved through the warriors. Derek grabbed the lens himself. Emily watched his shoulders stiffen. He had seen it. The current existed. Ethan looked at her. How long have you known? Since the 5th shot. The 5th? Derek turned sharply. You watched 8 more men fail and said nothing? Emily's fingers curled against the edge of the table. No one asked me. Derek laughed once, without humor. Convenient. He stepped toward the firing station and gestured to the weapon. Then perhaps you should show 13 royal warriors how it's done. The challenge was meant to humiliate her. Emily heard it in his voice. So did everyone else. Her heart began beating harder. She looked at the weapon. Then beyond it, across 4,000 meters of winter air. For a moment she was 19 again, standing outside the academy with a rejection letter in her hand. Then her gaze found the old insignia mounted above the tower entrance. A silver hawk crossing a mountain. Her father's unit. Daniel Carter had worn that mark until the day he died. Emily slowly removed her serving gloves. All right. Derek's smile vanished. What? She placed the gloves beside the tray. You asked me to show you. Adrian's violet eyes sharpened. Emily stepped toward the firing line. Derek moved to block her. I was mocking you. I know. You cannot seriously think, Captain. Adrian's voice stopped him. Derek looked toward his king. Adrian Blackwood studied Emily for one long moment. Not her dress. Not her Omega status. Not the serving tray behind her. Her. Do you want to take the shot? He asked. Emily looked at the weapon her father had taught her never to fear, then at 13 warriors who had laughed when she noticed what they had missed. She breathed in. Slowly. Yes. Adrian stepped aside, then let her. And for the first time since Emily Carter entered Blackwood Lodge as a waitress, every person on the mountain moved out of her way. The weapon looked different when no one expected her to know how to touch it. Emily Carter stepped onto the firing line, and the laughter behind her disappeared. For 1,000 meters of frozen valley stretched between the tower and the steel target on the opposite ridge. Wind pulled at her long chestnut brown hair and pressed the white fabric of her medieval dress against her legs. 13 royal warriors watched. Captain Derek Vaughn watched. And somewhere behind her, Alpha King Adrian Blackwood watched without saying a word. Emily stopped beside the firing station. She did not reach for the weapon immediately. That was the first thing Ethan Cole noticed. Amateurs always touched the weapon too quickly. They wanted to prove they belonged beside it. Emily examined the station instead. She checked the support, the elevation mechanism, the enchanted optic, the range markers carved into the adjustment wheel. Then she leaned close enough to inspect the sight without disturbing its position. Ethan's expression changed. "Where did you learn that?" Derek asked. Emily ignored him. Her father's voice lived somewhere beneath the mountain wind. "Never let another shooter's confidence become your calculation." She reset the previous adjustment. Derek stepped forward. "What are you doing?" "Removing yours." A few warriors exchanged glances. Derek's jaw tightened. "My elevation was correct. For your shot." Emily adjusted the optic. "Not mine." Adrian's violet eyes narrowed with interest. Derek looked toward his king, perhaps expecting intervention. None came. Emily lowered herself behind the firing station. The position felt familiar enough to hurt. For 2 years she had carried trays through this lodge. Before that, she had spent winters lying in snow beside Daniel Carter while he taught her how mountains moved air. Her father never began with weapons. He began with listening. Leaves. Birds. Snow. The silence before a gust. "Distance confirmed," Ethan said. "For 1,000 meters." Emily looked through the enchanted optic. The target appeared distant, but clear enough for the ceremonial trial, a broad steel plate mounted against pale stone, designed to register a successful strike with a resonant bell. She moved away from the optic. Derek laughed softly. "Problem? No, then why aren't you firing?" Emily watched a crimson marker halfway across the valley. Waiting. For what? She did not answer. 10 seconds passed. Then 20. Wind moved through the tower. A warrior shifted impatiently. Emily watched the lower flags. West to east. She looked toward the ravine. Snow climbed the cliff face. Southward push. Above it, the ravens circled. One folded its wings and descended. Another followed. Not yet. Derek folded his arms. Perhaps identifying wind and shooting through it are different skills. Emily breathed slowly. They are. Glad we agree. That's why I'm waiting. Ethan hid the beginning of a smile. Adrian did not. His face remained unreadable, but Emily could feel his attention with almost physical weight. She hated that she noticed. "Miss Carter." Adrian's voice came from behind her. Emily kept her gaze on the valley. "Your Majesty? Do you need the platform cleared?" The question surprised her. Derek looked offended. Emily understood what Adrian was offering. Silence. Space. Authority used not to command her, but to remove distractions. "No," she said. "Let them stay." Derek's eyebrows rose. Adrian gave one quiet response. "Very well." Emily returned to the optic. The world narrowed. Steel target. Snow. Rock. Wind. Her breathing slowed. She remembered Daniel beside her when she was 16. A missed practice target. Her frustration. His laugh. "You keep trying to defeat the mountain, Em. The mountain doesn't know you exist. Listen instead." Emily waited. A ribbon of snow lifted above the ravine. The lower flag loosened for half a heartbeat. The upper current shifted south. Now. Her fingers settled. Her breathing emptied. Stillness. She fired. The report struck the tower like thunder. Several warriors flinched. Emily did not. Across the valley, the shot vanished into distance. 1 second. 2. 3. No sound. Derek smiled. 4. 5. The spotter leaned into the enchanted lens. 6. Emily remained motionless. Then, from the opposite mountain, a metallic note rolled faintly across the valley. Clang. No one moved. The bell echoed once between the ridges. Ethan reached the observation lens first. Impact. Derek's smile disappeared. Where? Ethan adjusted focus. His scarred face went completely still. Center plate. A warrior stepped closer. How close? Ethan looked again. Near center. The firing tower fell silent. Emily closed her eyes for 1 second. Not because she was surprised. Because for the first time in years, she could hear her father laughing in memory instead of coughing in the final days before his last campaign. She rose from the station. Her knees were steady. Behind her, 13 royal warriors stared as if the waitress had become someone else while their backs were turned. Emily knew better. She had not changed at all. They had simply been forced to look. Derek approached the observation lens himself. Move. Ethan stepped aside. Derek stared through it. His shoulders stiffened. The target mechanism could be faulty. Ethan looked at him. You just watched it ring. The optic could be misreading the impact. Then inspected after the trial. Derek pulled away from the lens. Or she got lucky. There it was. Emily had expected something like it. Skill was difficult to deny when it came from the right person. From someone like her, luck was easier. She reached for her serving gloves. Then I suppose I was lucky. Derek frowned, apparently disappointed that she would not fight him. Emily picked up one glove. Wait. Adrian's voice stopped her. She turned. The Alpha King descended from the observation platform and walked toward the firing line. Black armor caught the winter light. His dark cloak moved behind him. He stopped beside the weapon, then looked across the valley before turning those glowing violet eyes toward Emily. Did you know that shot would land? Emily considered lying. I knew where I wanted it to land. Something almost like approval entered his expression. Derek stepped forward. Your Majesty, one successful attempt cannot establish, I agree. Emily looked at Adrian. Derek blinked, encouraged. Exactly. Adrian's gaze never left Emily. One shot leaves room for doubt. Emily understood before he finished. Derek smiled. Then have her do it again. The challenge returned, sharper this time. Several warriors looked uncomfortable now. Ethan watched Emily carefully. Adrian did not touch the weapon. He did not order her back into position. Instead, he asked, "Do you want to?" Emily looked toward the distant target. She could walk away with one impossible hit and let Derek call it luck forever. Or she could stay. Her father had once told her that proving yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you could become its own kind of prison. Emily believed him. That was why she did not look at Derek when she answered. She looked at the Alpha King. Move the target. Ethan's eyebrows rose. Derek stared. Adrian's violet eyes brightened slightly. How far? Emily shook her head. Distance doesn't matter. She pointed toward another section of the opposite ridge. Just somewhere he hasn't already calculated. No one laughed. Adrian turned toward the range crew. You heard her. Signal flags rose. Far across the frozen valley, royal attendants began repositioning the ceremonial target. Emily placed her serving gloves back on the table. Derek watched her as though he had finally realized the quiet waitress was not trying to embarrass him. She had simply stopped helping him underestimate her. And when the steel target began moving across the distant ridge, Alpha King Adrian Blackwood looked at Emily Carter with a question he had not asked aloud. Not whether she could make the second shot, but who exactly had taught an Omega waitress to make the first one. The second target stopped nearly half a kilometer east of the first position. Emily watched the signal flags rise across the valley. The range crew had chosen well. The new location sat closer to a broken line of dark cliffs, where the mountain forced the wind into a narrower channel before releasing it over the ridge. Different angle, different elevation, different problem. Captain Derek Vaughn folded his arms. Still confident? Emily did not answer. She returned to the firing station and looked through the enchanted optic. The ceremonial steel plate appeared against the snow, smaller now because of its new angle. Commander Ethan Cole stepped beside the range table. Revised distance. 4,180 meters. A murmur passed through the warriors. Derek smiled. You asked them to move it. Emily adjusted the elevation wheel. I did. You can withdraw. So can you. Ethan coughed into his fist. Derek's smile vanished. Emily lowered herself behind the weapon. This time, no one laughed. That difference should have satisfied her. Instead, it made her strangely sad. 5 minutes earlier, she had been the same woman. The same hands. The same eyes. The same years of training buried beneath a white serving dress. Only the sound of steel had changed what they believed she deserved. Her father had warned her about that too. People respect proof, Em. But never confuse their respect with your worth. Your worth existed before they noticed it. Emily breathed slowly and watched the valley. The new target created a harder calculation. The lower current remained west to east. The ravine still pushed upward, but the relocated plate now sat beyond a cliff that fractured the final wind into irregular pulses. She could not simply repeat the first correction. Derek leaned toward another warrior. She's taking too long. Adrian Blackwood heard him. So did you. Derek fell silent. Emily almost smiled. She kept watching. Snow curled from the cliff edge, vanished, then appeared again. Pulse. Pause. Pulse. The pattern repeated every several seconds. Not perfectly. Mountains never offered perfect patterns. But enough. Emily remembered lying beside Daniel Carter on a frozen hillside when she was 15, furious because she had missed the same wooden marker 3 times. Her father had taken the training weapon away. Not as punishment. He had made her sit beside him for nearly an hour without firing. Watch the grass. Watch the clouds. Watch what moves when you are standing still. Shooting begins long before the trigger. She had hated that lesson. Years later, she understood it was the most important one he ever gave her. Miss Carter. Adrian's voice was quieter now. Yes, Your Majesty. You can stop whenever you choose. Emily lifted her head slightly. He was not doubting her. He was giving her an exit. Again. She looked toward Derek. He was waiting for failure. Then toward the 13 warriors. Some looked skeptical. Others curious. Ethan looked almost certain of something he had not yet said. Finally, Emily looked at Adrian. I know. She returned to the optic. The Alpha King said nothing more. The wind pulsed over the cliff. Once. Pause. Twice. Emily adjusted one final mark. Her heartbeat slowed. The world narrowed until rank disappeared. Omega disappeared. Waitress disappeared. There was only distance, air, steel, and the quiet space between one breath and the next. She fired. Thunder rolled through the firing tower. The shot vanished across the valley. 1 second. 2. 3. Derek stared toward the target. 4. 5. Nothing. His mouth began to curve. 6. Then the distant mountain answered. Clang. Louder this time. Cleaner. Ethan was already behind the observation lens. Impact confirmed. Derek stepped toward him. Where? Ethan remained silent for a moment. Commander? Adrian asked. Ethan slowly pulled away from the lens. Closer to center than the first. Nobody spoke. Derek seized the optic. Emily rose from the station and brushed a loose strand of chestnut hair from her cheek. Her hands remained steady, but something inside her had begun to tremble. Not fear. Memory. Daniel should have been here. He should have seen this. He should have been standing behind her with that irritating half-smile he wore whenever she finally understood something he had spent weeks teaching. Instead, his insignia hung above a doorway while men who had forgotten his daughter stared at her as though she had appeared from nowhere. Derek pulled away from the lens. His face had lost color. What trick is this? Ethan's expression hardened. Enough. A waitress does not make 2 shots like that. On that, Ethan said, we agree. Emily looked at him sharply. Ethan stepped toward her. His eyes moved over her face as though comparing it with a memory. Carter, he said. Emily's chest tightened. Commander Daniel Carter. The name changed the air. Several older warriors looked toward Ethan. Adrian's attention sharpened immediately. You knew him. Ethan did not take his eyes from Emily. I served with him for 9 years. Emily swallowed. Then you knew my father. Derek stared between them. Daniel Carter had no son. Ethan turned slowly. No, his scarred face softened. He had a daughter. Silence. Emily wished, suddenly and painfully, that everyone would stop looking at her. Ethan stepped closer, but not enough to crowd her. He used to talk about a girl who could read Mountain Wind before she was old enough to attend academy. Emily looked down. He exaggerated. Daniel never exaggerated about shooting. Adrian descended from the royal platform. Why is his daughter serving tables in my lodge? No one answered. Emily could feel Derek watching her. Ethan looked genuinely confused. You applied to the Crown Academy, didn't you? Emily said nothing. Emily. Yes. Ethan's brow tightened. What happened? The old rejection letter seemed to unfold inside her mind. Qualification score, exceptional. Field observation, exceptional. Long-range aptitude, exceptional. Final determination, unsuitable. Emily lifted her eyes. They rejected me. For what reason? Adrian asked. She could have softened it. She had spent years softening it for herself. Perhaps there had been too few positions. Perhaps they wanted experienced candidates. Perhaps she had misunderstood. But standing beside a target she had struck twice after 13 royal warriors failed, those excuses suddenly sounded as hollow as they always had been. They said my temperament was unsuitable for combat service. Derek exhaled. Then the academy made its determination. Emily looked directly at him. You signed it. The firing tower went completely still. Derek's expression changed. Ethan turned toward him. Adrian did not move at all. Somehow that was worse. Captain Vaughn, the Alpha King, said quietly. Is that true? Derek straightened. I reviewed hundreds of candidates. That was not my question. Derek's jaw tightened. Emily remembered his signature at the bottom of the page. She had stared at it until candlelight blurred through her tears. Yes, Derek finally said. I signed the recommendation. Adrian's violet eyes cooled. On what basis? Derek glanced at Emily. There were concerns about suitability. Which concerns? Another silence. Emily already knew what he would avoid saying. So she said it for him. I was an Omega. Derek's eyes snapped toward her. Ethan became very still. Adrian looked from Derek to Emily, then toward the distant steel plate that had rung twice beneath her hand. When he spoke again, his voice carried across the entire firing tower. Bring me Emily Carter's academy file. Derek's face tightened. Your Majesty, the complete file. Adrian's gaze remained on Emily. Because I would like to understand how a woman deemed unfit to stand on this firing line just outperformed every warrior who was permitted to. For the first time that morning, Emily felt no satisfaction in Derek's silence. She felt something more dangerous. Hope. And she had learned years ago that hope could hurt far more than humiliation when someone powerful decided to take it away. The academy file arrived before sunset. Emily Carter knew it was hers before the royal clerk placed it on the long oak table. The leather cover was faded brown, the corners worn from years in storage, but the black ink across the front remained painfully familiar. Carter, Emily. Crown marksman candidate. She had once believed those words would become the beginning of her life. Instead, they had become the door that closed it. Open it. Adrian Blackwood stood at the head of the lodge council room, still dressed in black armor, his dark royal cloak hanging behind him. Captain Derek Vaughn stood opposite Emily. Commander Ethan Cole remained near the fireplace. For senior officers had been summoned as witnesses. No one was laughing now. The clerk broke the archive seal and opened the file. Emily kept her hands folded in front of her. She remembered being 19. She remembered arriving at the academy before sunrise because Daniel Carter had taught her that arriving exactly on time meant arriving late. She remembered competing against candidates twice her size. She remembered bleeding through one glove during the endurance trial and refusing to stop. Most of all, she remembered waiting 6 weeks for the letter that told her none of it mattered. The clerk began reading. Candidate Emily Carter. Age 19 at examination. Observation assessment, 98. Ethan looked up. 98? Yes, Commander. Continue. Range estimation, 97. Wind interpretation, 100. Long range aptitude, 99. Field discipline, 96. One of the senior officers slowly turned toward Derek. Emily stared at the grain of the table. She had known her scores were high. Hearing them aloud before the Alpha King felt different. Adrian said nothing. The clerk continued. Overall qualification rank, 3rd. Silence settled across the room. Adrian's violet eyes lifted. 3rd out of how many candidates? The clerk checked the page. 214, Your Majesty. Ethan swore quietly. Derek stiffened. Adrian looked at Emily. You ranked 3rd. It was not a question. Yes. How many candidates were accepted that year? 40, the clerk answered. Adrian turned toward Derek. And the candidate ranked 3rd was rejected. Derek clasped his hands behind his back. Scores are not the only consideration for combat placement. No, Adrian said. They are not. He looked toward the clerk. Read the field comments. Exceptional patience. Strong environmental awareness. Demonstrates unusual ability to identify layered wind movement. Maintains composure under observation. No disciplinary concerns. The clerk turned the page. Team assessment, satisfactory. Physical endurance, above standard. Ethan's scarred face hardened. Where is the unsuitable temperament? The clerk searched. Final review. Emily already knew what came next. She could almost see Derek's signature at the bottom. Recommendation denied. Candidate demonstrates temperament unsuitable for combat service and may perform more effectively in logistical or support duties. Adrian's fingers rested against the table. Evidence supporting that conclusion? The clerk searched the remaining pages. Then searched again. None attached. Derek spoke. Final recommendations often incorporate factors that are not reflected numerically. Adrian looked at him. Name them. Command judgment. That is a phrase, Captain. I asked for factors. Derek's jaw tightened. Pack stability. Unit cohesion. Deployment practicality. Emily felt the old humiliation returning, dressed in cleaner language. Ethan heard it too. Say what you mean, Vaughn. Derek looked toward him. Mixed combat units create complications. What complications? An unmated Omega deployed among Alpha and Beta soldiers can disrupt unit dynamics. There it was. Not temperament. Not ability. Not discipline. Omega. Emily felt strangely calm. Adrian's expression revealed almost nothing. Was there a Crown regulation prohibiting Omega candidates? Not explicitly. Was Carter medically unfit? No. Did she fail any required assessment? No. Did she violate academy discipline? Derek's silence answered. Adrian leaned back slightly. Then you rejected the 3rd-ranked candidate because you believed the men around her might fail to control themselves. Derek's face reddened. That is an unfair characterization. Emily finally spoke. It was the characterization they gave me. Everyone turned toward her. Her voice remained quiet. Not in the official letter. An instructor explained afterward. He said the Corps would always see my designation before my skill. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Adrian looked at Emily. And after that? She shrugged, though the movement cost more than she wanted anyone to know. I applied to 2 scouting units. Rejected. Without trials. Then, my father died. Ethan's face softened. Emily looked toward Daniel's old Silverhawk insignia visible through the open council room doors. There wasn't much money left. Blackwood Lodge needed staff. I needed work. Derek exhaled impatiently. None of this changes military reality. Adrian turned toward him. No, one ceremonial target does not make someone fit for war. 2 targets, Ethan said. Derek ignored him. She has no battlefield experience. Emily looked at Derek. Neither did I when you denied me the opportunity to gain it. That silenced him. Adrian's gaze remained on her for several seconds. Then he turned to the clerk. Where is the original evaluation sheet? This is the archived copy, Your Majesty. I asked for the original. The clerk hesitated. There should be one beneath the final review. He separated several pages. Nothing. Ethan stepped closer. Missing? It appears so. Derek's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Emily noticed. So did Adrian. The Alpha King's voice became quieter. Captain Vaughn. Your Majesty? Did you remove anything from this file? No. Did you alter Carter's recommendation? No. Emily watched Derek carefully. She had spent 2 years serving people who forgot she could hear them. She knew the difference between indignation and fear. Derek was afraid. The clerk examined the binding. Your Majesty. He held the file toward the light. A page was cut out. Ethan crossed the room. Along the inner seam, a narrow strip of parchment remained. Adrian looked toward Derek. Still nothing you wish to tell me? No, the clerk carefully opened the next surviving page. Something slipped free and landed on the table. A small piece of yellowed paper. Emily recognized the handwriting immediately. Her breath stopped. That's my father's. Ethan picked it up but did not unfold it. He looked at Emily first. Do you want to read it? The question surprised her. She nodded. Ethan handed it over. Emily unfolded the note. Daniel Carter's handwriting crossed the page in hurried black strokes. If Emily's application reaches final review, judge her by the same standard as every other candidate. She has earned that much. Beneath it was another sentence. If anyone tells you her designation makes her unsuitable, ask them what they are afraid she will discover. Emily read the final words twice. Adrian stepped closer. Discover what? Emily slowly lifted her eyes. I don't know. Ethan looked troubled. Daniel never mentioned this to me. Derek moved toward the door. A royal guard immediately blocked him. I have duties at the range. Adrian did not even turn. Your duties have changed. Derek froze. Adrian's violet eyes settled on the missing page inside Emily's file. Captain Vaughn is relieved of command pending investigation. Your Majesty, you rejected a qualified crown candidate without documented cause. A page is missing from her archive. Her father left a warning inside the same file. Adrian finally looked at him. You are going nowhere until I know why. Derek's face went pale. Emily stared down at her father's note. All these years, she had believed the Academy rejected her because being Omega made her inconvenient. That truth still hurt. But now another possibility opened beneath it. Maybe someone had needed her away from the Crown Marksman Corps for a reason that had nothing to do with prejudice. Maybe Daniel Carter had known it. And maybe the Quiet Waitress, who had spent 2 years searching Blackwood Lodge for answers, had just forced the first hidden door open with 2 impossible shots. Your father knew someone inside the Crown wanted you kept away from the range. Adrian Blackwood's words followed Emily down the stone corridor long after the council chamber doors closed behind them. Daniel Carter's note remained folded inside her hand. The parchment had softened with age, but his handwriting was unmistakable. She had seen those same sharp letters on grocery lists, training notes, birthday cards, and the small wooden markers he used during her childhood lessons. Now one sentence had turned everything she believed about her rejection into a question. Ask them what they're afraid she will discover. Emily stopped beside a tall window overlooking the frozen valley. Darkness had swallowed the distant target. He could have meant anything. Adrian stopped several feet behind her. Do you believe that? I want to. That wasn't my question. Emily looked down at the note. No, Commander Ethan Cole approached carrying the Academy file. There's something else. Emily turned. Ethan placed the folder on a narrow stone table beneath a torch. The page removed from your file wasn't part of the final evaluation. How do you know? Archive numbering. He showed her the lower corners of 2 surviving pages. 37. 39. Page 38 was inserted before the rejection recommendation. Adrian's violet eyes narrowed. What belonged there? Ethan hesitated. Special aptitude assessment. Emily frowned. I never took one. You may not have known you were taking it. Ethan opened another candidate file the clerk had provided. Candidates with exceptional observation scores were sometimes given additional field exercises. Pattern recognition. Terrain reconstruction. Identifying concealed firing positions. Emily remembered her final week at the academy. An instructor had shown her sketches of mountain passes and asked where she would place scouts. Another had presented impact patterns and asked her to reconstruct where the shots originated. She had thought they were ordinary examinations. I did those. Ethan nodded. Then page 38 probably contained your results. Adrian looked toward the missing strip of parchment. And someone cut them out. Emily felt cold despite the torch beside her. Why would anyone care how well a 19-year-old Omega read terrain? Ethan's scarred face tightened. Because Daniel could do the same thing. Silence. Emily looked at him. What aren't you telling me? Ethan breathed out slowly. Your father wasn't only a marksman. I know. He was a Royal Scout. Toward the end, he specialized in counterposition analysis. Emily waited. Ethan continued. When our patrols were attacked, Daniel could study the terrain and determine where an enemy observer had been positioned. Sometimes from almost nothing. Broken snow. A displaced stone. An unusual line of retreat. Emily looked toward the window. Suddenly her father's strange childhood lessons felt different. He had never merely taught her to shoot. He had taught her to reconstruct what the landscape was saying. His last campaign, Ethan said, was supposed to be reconnaissance along the northern border. Emily's throat tightened. Supposed to be? Adrian caught the word immediately. Commander. Ethan looked toward his king. The official report says Daniel's unit entered a mountain pass and was caught in an enemy ambush. 7 men died. Including my father, Emily whispered. Yes. What does that have to do with my academy file? Ethan looked at Daniel's note in her hand. 3 weeks before that mission, your father came to me. He believed someone was manipulating Crown Range reports. Adrian became still. Explain. Observation posts were recording wind, distance, and enemy movement. But Daniel found discrepancies. Small ones. Coordinates shifted. Patrol routes changed after being filed. Marksmen sent to positions that offered poor visibility. Sabotage, Adrian said. Ethan nodded. Daniel thought someone with access to military records was altering field information. Emily's heartbeat became louder. Did he know who? He never told me. Why not? Because he didn't trust anyone enough. The answer hurt more than she expected. Not even you? Ethan looked away. Apparently not. Footsteps approached. A royal clerk hurried down the corridor carrying a narrow archive ledger. Your Majesty. We found the access record for Carter's academy file. Adrian took it. Who opened it? Several instructors during examination. Captain Vaughn during final review. The clerk hesitated. And one additional person 6 days before the rejection was issued. Emily's fingers tightened around her father's note. Who? The clerk turned the ledger toward Adrian. The signature is abbreviated. R.M. Ethan's face changed. Adrian noticed. You recognize it? Maybe. Name. Ethan hesitated. Roland Mercer. Emily knew the name. Everyone in the Northern Pax did. General Mercer? Former General Mercer, Ethan corrected. He commanded Daniel's final campaign. The corridor seemed to narrow around her. Adrian read the entry again. Why would a field general access an Omega candidate's academy file? No one answered. Emily looked at the dates. 6 days before her rejection. Her father had already been dead for almost 3 months. He knew who I was. Ethan nodded reluctantly. He would have. Did he know what my father was investigating? Possibly. Emily closed her eyes. She remembered Mercer attending Daniel's memorial. Tall. Gray uniform. Heavy hand on her shoulder. Your father served the crown with honor. She had been 19 and barely able to breathe through grief. Mercer had told her Daniel died instantly. He had told her not to torture herself with questions. Weeks later, someone bearing his initials opened her academy file. Where is Mercer now? Adrian asked. Retired estate near Grey Haven, Ethan answered. Send riders. Adrian's order came immediately. Do not arrest him. Do not warn him. I want surveillance first. Emily looked at Adrian. You think he removed the page? I think his name appearing here earns a question, not a conviction. That answer steadied her. Derek would have decided first and justified it later. Adrian demanded evidence even when suspicion offered an easier path. The clerk cleared his throat. There's one more thing. He opened the ledger to an attached inventory sheet. Page 38 was not the only item removed. Emily stared at him. What else? A sealed candidate submission. Ethan frowned. Candidates didn't submit sealed materials. This one was registered separately. The clerk traced the faded entry. Delivered by Daniel Carter 2 days before his final deployment. Emily stopped breathing. My father left something for me? Apparently. What? The clerk read the inventory description. One field notebook. Black leather. Coded range observations. Release authorized only upon Emily Carter's acceptance into Crown service. Emily understood before anyone said it. If she entered the Corps, she received Daniel's notebook. If she was rejected, it remained hidden. Her father had built a path for evidence to reach her. Someone had closed that path. Who signed the removal? Adrian asked. The clerk turned the page. The signature line had been scraped until the parchment nearly tore. But beneath the damage, 3 letters remained visible. R.M. Emily stared at them. The mountain wind struck the windows outside. For years she had believed the Crown Academy took away the future her father trained her for. Now she understood something far worse. Someone may have rejected her precisely because becoming a Crown marksman would have placed Daniel Carter's final evidence in her hands. Adrian looked at her. Emily. She unfolded her father's note one last time. Ask them what they're afraid she will discover. When she raised her luminous blue eyes, the quiet waitress was gone from her expression. Find the notebook. Adrian's violet gaze held hers. We will. Emily shook her head. No, Your Majesty. Her voice remained soft, but it no longer carried hesitation. I've spent 4 years letting other people decide which doors I'm allowed to open. She folded the note carefully. This one belongs to me. And for the first time, Alpha King Adrian Blackwood did not see Daniel Carter's daughter standing before him. He saw the woman Daniel had been preparing to finish what he could not. The notebook was never sent to the Academy archive. The royal clerk placed a second ledger beneath the candlelight. Emily Carter stood across from him in the Blackwood Lodge records chamber, her father's faded note still tucked safely inside her white dress. Adrian Blackwood remained beside the locked door, black armor almost disappearing against the dark stone wall. Commander Ethan Cole leaned over the ledger. Then where did it go? That is the problem. The clerk traced a line with one finger. Daniel Carter's package arrived at Crown Academy 2 days before his final deployment. It was registered, sealed, and transferred to military custody. Emily's pulse quickened. Transferred where? The clerk turned the page. Blackwood Mountain Lodge. Nobody spoke. Emily slowly looked around the room. She had spent 2 years here. 2 years carrying trays through these corridors, cleaning tables beneath officers who never remembered her name, searching quietly whenever duty brought her near the old campaign archives. Her father's notebook had been inside the same building. Who received it? Adrian asked. The quartermaster at the time. Name? The clerk hesitated. Roland Mercer. Emily closed her eyes. Of course. Adrian's voice remained controlled. Search the archive. We already began, Your Majesty. Nothing is registered under Carter. Emily opened her eyes. Then don't search under Carter. Ethan looked at her. What? She remembered her father labeling practice targets with meaningless numbers. Daniel never wrote important information where the obvious reader expected it. He knew someone was altering Crown records. If he suspected Mercer, he wouldn't trust his own name on the notebook once it reached military custody. Ethan considered that. What would he use? Emily looked toward the old campaign shelves. A range coordinate. They entered the lower archive minutes later. Dust hung in the candlelight. Hundreds of leather boxes filled shelves carved directly into the stone. Emily moved slowly between them, reading faded labels. Campaign dates. Patrol sectors. Supply routes. Observation posts. Adrian followed without crowding her. What are you looking for? Something my father expected me to understand. That narrows it considerably. She glanced back. His face remained serious. Emily almost smiled despite herself. Ethan joined them. Daniel had a favorite training range. Emily shook her head. He had 12. Of course he did. She stopped. A memory surfaced. Daniel sitting beside her on a hillside after her first perfect long-distance practice shot. She had been 14 and unbearably proud. He had written 3 numbers in the snow with his glove. 479, Emily whispered. Ethan frowned. What? He used to call it my lucky range. 479 meters? No, just 479. Emily searched the shelf labels. Sector 471. 474. 478. Then 479. She pulled the archive box forward. It was surprisingly light. Adrian took the weight before it slipped from her hands, then placed it on the stone table. Emily opened it. Empty. Her hope collapsed. Someone got here first. Adrian examined the box. Maybe. He ran one gloved finger along the interior. The depth is wrong. Ethan looked closer. False bottom. Emily's breath caught. Adrian stepped back. Your box. Again, choice. Emily found the narrow seam and lifted the hidden panel. Beneath it lay a black leather notebook. She stopped moving. The world seemed to lose sound. For years. For years since Daniel Carter had left for his final campaign and never returned. Yet she recognized the worn leather immediately. Her father had carried that notebook everywhere. Emily? Ethan said gently. She reached down. Her fingers trembled when they touched it. This time she did not hide them. On the first page, Daniel had written only one sentence. If they make sure I cannot explain this myself. Her vision blurred. Emily swallowed until the words became clear again. Adrian said nothing. That kindness mattered. She turned the page. Columns of numbers filled the paper. Wind readings. Coordinates. Patrol times. Shot directions. To everyone else, it looked like field mathematics. To Emily, it looked wrong. These aren't shooting records. Ethan leaned closer. What are they? He disguised movement patterns as range calculations. She followed one sequence. Distance. Direction. Elevation. Time. Daniel had taught her this cipher during childhood games. Convert distance into map sectors. Wind direction into travel direction. Elevation into hour. He wanted me to decode it. Adrian's attention sharpened. Emily worked through the first line. Northern observation post. Patrol leaves at dawn. Route changed, she paused. 12 minutes before departure. Ethan's face hardened. That information would have been restricted. She decoded another. Then another. Every entry showed the same pattern. Crown Patrol instructions were being altered shortly before soldiers entered the field. Someone was redirecting them, Emily whispered. Adrian looked at the notebook. Toward enemy positions? Sometimes. Her finger moved down the page. Other times away from specific areas. Ethan understood first. Someone wasn't only causing ambushes. They were protecting something. Emily turned several pages. Daniel had marked one coordinate repeatedly. 8-14-3. She decoded it. Greyhaven. Ethan's eyes lifted. Roland Mercer's estate was near Greyhaven. Emily continued. There's a mountain outpost here. No crown designation. Adrian stepped closer. A hidden installation? Maybe. At the bottom of the page, Daniel had drawn a small symbol, a silver hawk with one broken wing. Emily knew that mark too. Danger. Do not approach directly. Then she found the final entry. The handwriting was rushed, the ink darker. Mercer knows I found the altered routes. If this notebook reaches Emily, she will see what the others missed. Emily stopped breathing. Ethan looked away, grief tightening his face. Adrian's jaw became rigid. But there was another line. If she enters Crown Service, give her the notebook. If she does not, assume they stopped her. Emily stared at the sentence. Her academy rejection had not happened beside her father's investigation by coincidence. Daniel had predicted it. Someone had made certain she never received his evidence. There's more, Ethan said. The final page had been folded inward. Emily opened it. A rough map appeared beneath the crease. Greyhaven Mountains. Hidden outpost. 3 approach routes. One marked with an X. Another with a warning symbol. The third ended at a small circle. Beside it, Daniel had written, "The second target is never where they tell you to look." Emily remembered the firing trial that morning. 13 warriors had aimed where official calculations told them to aim. She had succeeded because she looked beyond the markers. Her father had built his final message around the same lesson. Adrian studied the map. "Mercer expects investigators to search his estate." Emily nodded. "So the evidence won't be there. Where will it be?" She placed her finger on the small circle several kilometers beyond Greyhaven. "Here." Ethan examined it. "That's abandoned crown land." "Exactly." Adrian looked at her. "You understand this could be dangerous." Emily met his glowing violet eyes. "So was spending 4 years believing my father died because he made a mistake. I did not say you should stay behind." She blinked. Adrian continued, "I said you should understand the danger before choosing." Something warm and unfamiliar moved through her chest. He was not protecting her by closing another door. He was making certain she saw what waited beyond it. Emily closed the black notebook and held it against her heart. "Then I choose to go." Adrian nodded once. "We leave at dawn." Outside, mountain wind struck the archive windows. Somewhere beyond Blackwood Lodge, Greyhaven waited beneath winter darkness. Emily had begun the day as a waitress nobody noticed. By nightfall, she held evidence that could expose a betrayal buried inside the crown for years. But one thought followed her as she left the archive beside the Alpha King. Daniel Carter had not left his final truth to a general, a commander, or one of Blackwood's legendary warriors. He had left it to the daughter everyone else had decided did not belong among them because he knew Emily would look where stronger men had been taught not to see. Someone was here before us. Emily Carter knew it before Commander Ethan Cole found the footprints. Dawn had barely touched the Greyhaven Mountains when she stood beside the abandoned Crown outpost, Daniel Carter's black leather notebook held beneath her white cloak. Snow covered the surrounding pines, untouched except for a narrow trail leading toward the ruined stone structure. Ethan crouched beside the tracks. 3 people. Maybe 4. Adrian Blackwood dismounted behind her, black armor dark against the winter landscape. His violet eyes moved from the footprints to the broken outpost door. "Recent?" Ethan pressed 2 fingers into one print. "After last night's snowfall." Emily's stomach tightened. They had left Blackwood Lodge before sunrise with 6 royal guards and no public announcement. Only the people inside the investigation knew where they were going. Yet someone had reached Greyhaven first. "They know about the notebook," she whispered. Adrian looked at her. "Or they know we found something." Neither possibility comforted her. The outpost stood where Daniel's map had promised, hidden inside a narrow fold between 2 ridges. From the main road, it would have been invisible. Its watchtower had partially collapsed, and vines covered the old crown insignia above the entrance. "Stay behind the guards," Ethan said. Emily looked at him. "My father's message brought us here." "Which is precisely why someone may expect you." Adrian raised one hand before either could continue. "No one enters alone. Emily stays with us. Not behind. With." The distinction was small. She noticed it anyway. 2 guards entered first. Moments later, one returned. "Clear, Your Majesty." "No one inside." Adrian nodded. They entered. The air smelled of damp stone and old ash. Empty shelves lined the walls. A broken table lay near the hearth. Nothing suggested the outpost had once mattered enough for Daniel Carter to risk his life documenting it. Ethan inspected the floor. Recently disturbed. Emily looked down. Dust covered most of the stones, but near the eastern wall, several patches had been wiped clean. Someone had moved something heavy. Adrian noticed scrape marks near the base. There. 2 guards shifted an empty cabinet away from the wall. Behind it was stone. Ethan frowned. "Nothing." Emily opened Daniel's notebook. "The second target is never where they tell you to look." Her eyes moved around the room. Her father had marked the outpost with a circle, but the warning symbol sat several meters beyond it. "We're looking in the wrong place." Ethan glanced over. "Again? The outpost is the first target." She walked toward the rear window. Beyond it, Snow descended toward a frozen stream. He marked something behind the building. Adrian joined her. How far? Emily checked the map. About 80 meters. They moved outside. The guards spread into a defensive formation while Emily followed the stream. She counted her steps automatically. 50, 60, 70. At 82, she stopped beside a dead pine split by lightning. Nothing. Derek's voice seemed to return from yesterday. A waitress does not make two shots like that. Emily pushed the memory away and studied the landscape. Daniel had taught her that a hidden position revealed itself by what did not belong. Snow, rocks, pine roots. Then she saw it. A rectangular patch of ground where snow lay too evenly. Here. Ethan brushed away the surface. Beneath it was a flat stone fitted with an iron ring. A concealed hatch. Adrian looked toward the guards. Perimeter. Emily knelt. Ethan reached for the ring, but she touched his wrist. Wait. A thin strand ran beneath the iron. Almost invisible. Ethan froze. Wire. Adrian crouched several feet away, careful not to disturb it. Alarm? Emily examined the direction. Maybe. The strand disappeared beneath the snow toward the trees. Ethan followed it visually. Simple warning line. One guard carefully traced and disconnected it. Only then did Adrian lift the hatch. Cold air rose from below. Stone steps descended into darkness. Ethan lit a lantern. Now I definitely recommend staying behind me. Emily managed a faint smile. That one I'll accept. They descended. The chamber beneath the forest was small but not abandoned. Shelves held sealed military ledgers. Old route maps covered one wall. Wooden crates bore crown supply markings that had supposedly been retired years ago. Ethan opened one ledger and went pale. Patrol schedules. Adrian took another. These are copies of restricted deployment orders. Emily stared around the room. Her father had been right. Someone had created a hidden archive outside official crown control. Why keep them? She asked. Adrian turned pages. Because altered orders are only useful if you preserve the originals. Ethan understood. Proof of what was changed. Emily approached the wall map. Red marks identified Crown patrol routes. Several ended at locations Daniel had listed as ambush sites. Others curved deliberately away from one region near the northern border. They were clearing these areas, she said. For what? Ethan asked. Emily followed the marks. They formed a corridor through the mountains. Not random. Protected. Adrian stepped beside her. Smuggling route. Ethan nodded slowly. Weapons. Silver. Information. Anything valuable enough. Emily's gaze found one date. Daniel's final mission. His patrol route had originally passed west of the corridor. Someone had altered it east, directly toward the ambush. Her hand went cold. They sent him there. Adrian looked at the map. Yes. No comforting lie. No softened answer. Emily appreciated him for that even while the truth hurt. He didn't die because he failed to see the ambush. Her voice cracked despite her effort. They put him in it. Ethan lowered his head. Emily, a sound came from above. One sharp whistle. Royal warning signal. Adrian immediately turned. Someone's approaching. The chamber changed in an instant. Guards moved toward the stairs. Ethan closed the ledger. Adrian looked at Emily. Stay beside me. Footsteps crossed the snow overhead. Not running. Deliberate. Then a familiar voice called from outside. Your Majesty. I would prefer we speak before your guards make an unfortunate decision. Ethan's face drained of color. Emily knew the voice too, though she had not heard it since her father's memorial. Adrian climbed the stairs first. Emily followed several steps behind. When she emerged into the winter light, 6 royal guards had formed a line around the hatch. Beyond them stood an older man in a gray traveling coat, silver hair swept back from a severe face. He carried no visible weapon. 2 attendants waited far behind him. Roland Mercer. The former general looked older than Emily remembered, but his eyes were exactly the same. Calm. Measuring. He looked at Adrian first. Then Ethan. Finally Emily. His expression changed. Not surprise. Recognition. Daniel's daughter. Emily felt 4 years of grief harden into something steady. You opened my academy file. Mercer's gaze dropped briefly toward the black notebook beneath her cloak. So you found it. Adrian stepped slightly between them, not blocking Emily, only narrowing Mercer's path. You will explain why your signature appears on the removal record. Mercer looked toward the hidden chamber. If you think I came here to destroy Daniel Carter's evidence, you are already making the same mistake that killed him. Ethan stiffened. Choose your next words carefully. Mercer's face tightened with something that looked almost like regret. Daniel discovered the altered patrol routes. I discovered them too. Emily stared at him. Then why was my father sent into an ambush? Mercer looked directly at her. Because the order that redirected his unit carried my authorization. Her breath stopped. Mercer continued before anyone could speak. An authorization I never gave. Adrian's violet eyes sharpened. Forged. Yes. And Emily's file? Mercer glanced at the notebook again. I removed Daniel's submission because by then I knew someone inside Crown Command could reproduce my seal, access classified routes, and kill anyone who noticed. Emily's anger rose. So you protected me by destroying my future? No, Mercer's answer came quietly. I made a terrible choice because I thought keeping you outside military command would keep you alive. Emily stared at him. You could have told me. And if you had started asking questions? I did anyway. For the first time, Mercer almost smiled. It held no humor. Daniel said you would. Adrian stepped forward. Who forged your authorization? Mercer's eyes moved toward the royal guards, then back to the Alpha King. That is why I came before you opened the final ledger. Ethan looked toward the chamber. What final ledger? Mercer's expression hardened. The one containing payments for every altered patrol route. Emily's heartbeat accelerated. Adrian said, name. Mercer shook his head. You need to see the signature yourself. They returned underground. Mercer walked to the rear shelf and removed a narrow iron box hidden behind 2 supply ledgers. From inside, he produced a sealed book. Adrian broke the old wax. Emily stood beside him as he turned to the final recorded payment. The amount was enormous. Beside it was a crown authorization mark. Ethan inhaled sharply. Emily recognized the symbol from every royal decree displayed inside Blackwood Lodge. Not Mercer's seal. Not Derek's. The private insignia belonged to the office responsible for coordinating military intelligence directly beneath the throne. Adrian's face became utterly still. This cannot leave the chamber, he said. Emily looked at him. Why? Adrian slowly lifted his violet eyes from the ledger. Because whoever arranged your father's death was not operating outside my kingdom. His hand closed around the page. They were standing close enough to my throne to sign orders in my name.